Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Jackson. The date is May 26th, 2022, and this is my self reflection presentation. Here I will be giving a short overview of my 9 chosen concepts, and I will also be talking about how this information will be useful in the future to continue to enhance my conflict management beyond this course. Also, before I get into it, I do apologize if there is some stuffiness in my voice. I am still getting over a brief bout with COVID, so once again, I apologize for that. So to start off, my Module 1 concept was listening. JANT 2017, Conflict and Communications, provides 5 definable stages of listening, where Stage 1 is hearing and attending to the message, Stage 2 is deciphering the meaning from the message, Stage 3 is remembering what was heard, Stage 4 is thinking critically about the message, and Stage 5 is answering and giving feedback to the speaker. I think it is important to know these 5 definable stages so that you can work on them individually, as they are all a part of this response and feedback process that is an essential part to communication. The concept I chose for Module 2 was power in conflict. Now, how is power related to conflict? Conflict often results from the exercise of power. When discussing this topic, I chose to cover 2 types of power dynamics discussed in JANT 2017, Conflict and Communication. The first type is power over, as in the ability to dominate another person or group. Conversely, the second type is power with, and this advocates for the ideas of reciprocal relationships and non-coercive power sharing. Understanding which power type one is dealing with can allow for greater proficiency in navigating any given conflict one finds themselves in. For Module 3, I chose to reflect on the topic of narrative in conflict. A narrative is a written or spoken account of connected events. Relating this to the concept of conflict, I wrote my reflection under the assumption that the narrative means the context and sequence of events surrounding the conflict and how the various people involved view them. There were 3 models of deconstructing conflict described in JANT 2017 that stressed the importance of the story or narrative about the conflict itself. The Ware and Hawker-Wilmot conflict assessments both stress the importance of history, context, and nature of conflict. But the change-oriented model really drove home its necessity when solving and dealing with conflict. In the future, the concept of narrative in conflict and understanding it will be essential towards broadening my skills in conflict management, because it is essential to understanding each person's viewpoints within the conflict, and it will help understand how the large portion of the conflict has been shaped and how it will play out in the future. For my Module 4 reflection, I discussed the differences between individualistic and collectivistic cultures, particularly in relation to conflict. In individualistic cultures, the interests of the individual prevail over the interests of the group. In collectivistic cultures, the interests of the group prevail over the interests of the individual. These 2 definitions come from Hofstede, 1997, as cited in JANT 2017, page 75. Individualistic and collectivistic cultures define and resolve conflicts very differently, since one values the self and one values group harmony. Individualistic cultures tend to view conflict as a natural part of human interaction, but at least for in-group relationships, collectivistic cultures may view conflict as an aberration. Understanding the differences between cultures is essential to identifying the most optimal ways to solve conflicts depending on the area and/or person you're speaking to. The topic I discussed in my Module 5 reflection was negotiation strategies. These strategies are the approaches that negotiators use to pursue goals or objectives. The 5 strategies of negotiation are structural, strategic, processual, behavioral, and integrative. Most negotiators use a combination of these approaches. JANT 2017 calls these first 3 strategies distributive negotiation strategies, and they seek to maximize the negotiator's personal gains, while the last 2 strategies are called integrative negotiation strategies, and they seek to maximize joint gains. In the future, the last 2 strategies are preferable for conflict management beyond this course because they deal with conflict in a joint and communicative way. The topic I discussed in Module 6 was that of anger management. Anger management helps one spot their anger and learn to address it in a manner that may lead to more productive outcomes. JANT 2017 discusses 2 different models to productively express anger. The first model is the XYZ formula from Gottman, Notarius, and Markman, 1976. It is a simple conflict model that involves a 3-step process for expressing anger. Here is the model. When you do X, which is described behavior, in situation Y, I feel Z. For example, when you interrupt me, X, while I am studying, Y, I get extremely annoyed, Z. The second model comes from a Vietnamese Buddhist monk named Thich Nhat Hanh. I've probably butchered that name, but I'm just reading it how it looks, so. The man advocated for productive expressions of anger and provided 3 steps to constructively transforming it: to embrace the anger and examine it, To transform it if one can, but if one cannot, confide one's suffering to someone else. Next, resolve not to do anything with that anger and determine its origins. Lastly, to express in some way that one needs another person's help in the conflict to overcome their anger. These models will be helpful in the future because they provide set ways to help guide either yourself or others through anger, which is immensely important for managing conflicts as anger tends to drive many of them. For my Module 7 reflection, the topic I chose was mediation in conflict. Putnam, 2013, Definitions and Approaches to Conflict and Communication, describes a mediator as a neutral party that facilitates communication between disputing parties and helps them determine mutually agreeable solutions. This means that only the disputing parties can decide on an agreement and not the mediator. Even though the mediator may see an obvious solution to the conflict, he or she cannot make that decision. Understanding the role of a mediator will help me act as one for conflicts in the future. As I am aiming to be a teacher in the future, I have no doubt that I will have to informally mediate some conflicts. For my Module 8 reflection, I chose the topic of online dispute resolution, or ODR, and it is not without its limitations. According to Jant 2017, page 174, the major element missing in early ODR was, of course, the nonverbal cues that can be important in face-to-face meetings. This was thought to negatively affect the richness of the communication and contribute to its impersonality, which may in turn affect truthfulness. However, the advantages of ODR are not to be discounted. According to Walther, 1996, Computer-Mediated Communication, ODR and online communication in general, due to the aforementioned impersonality, gives not only the opportunity to have greater control over verbal messages, but also levels the playing field of the participants, aka reduces the power differences between the communicators, thus eliminating any inhibitions towards expressing oneself. And lastly, ODR allows one to communicate conveniently and over long distances. Understanding how ODR affects conflict is important because ODR conflict requires a different approach than regular in-person conflict, and learning the differences can determine the success of my conflict management in the future. For my Module 9 reflection, I chose the topic of forgiveness in conflict. Forgiveness is an important part of relationships, while also being a difficult one. I discussed 3 different models in my reflection that have been developed to identify the steps in forgiving someone. Those models are the 4-phase Enright 2001 model, the 5-step Worthington 2001 model, and the 7-step Waldron and Kelly 2008 model. Learning how to forgive is not only beneficial to any future conflicts I might find myself in, as it may save my interpersonal relationships with those hypothetical people, but also forgiveness is good for one's health. According to Jant 2017, page 203, unforgiveness or holding hostile feelings towards offenders creates stress, which is related to disorders of cardiovascular and immune systems. And not only that, people who are unforgiving have a higher chance of experiencing more anger and depression. And those are my 9 chosen concepts that I have reflected on over the course of the term. I apologize for any jankiness experienced during those first few topics reviewed. I got more comfortable speaking on these topics halfway through the presentation. Anyways, thank you for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful summer.